In the orbit of Tau Ceti, aboard the sprawling silver tendrils of the Galactic Archive Station, Valtor pressed a tri-fingered hand against the shimmering control matrix of the chronolens. His eyes, dark as collapsed stars, narrowed as streams of Earth's historical data, flooded the observation chamber. Among the countless wars, revolutions, and betrayals catalogued from the human timeline, one stood out, not for its clarity, but for its vagueness. The War of 1812. To Valtor, a xenohistorian of the Virene Dominion, ambiguity was an insult to order. History, in his people's philosophy, was a matter of precision, a sequence of cause and consequence, not myth and contradiction. Yet the war between the early American Republic and the sprawling British Empire was a fogged mirror. Every account contradicted the last. Some records labeled the Americans as the victors, others insisted it was a stalemate, and a few hinted that it was the British who held the upper hand until they inexplicably retreated. He initiated the scan again, refining it to the winter of 1814. A visual emerged. A British column marching toward Washington, smoke trailing behind them, bayonets gleaming in the early dusk. Valtor's gaze caught on something else, a flicker, a pulse of radiation embedded in the image, not natural, not human, temporal energy, alien in origin and eerily similar to that used by the Virene themselves. He hesitated. Temporal laws forbade direct engagement, especially within a volatile window. But this was an anomaly, a potential external influence in humanity's pre-galactic history. If proven, it could disqualify Earth from protected development status. Worse, it could explain why Earth's rise had been delayed by centuries. He overrode the safety locks. With a surge of cold light, Valtor activated direct presence mode, a form of temporal projection that enabled him to appear in the past without physically altering the timeline. At least in theory. His form de-resed and reformed in 1814 Washington, D.C., just hours before its burning. He stood invisible to the humans, observing the frenetic scurrying of soldiers and politicians as the British advanced. Then everything went wrong. A pulse, sharp and bright, detonated across the temporal boundary. The projection faltered. Valtor felt his presence solidify, atoms dragging through time like claws across glass. The feedback loop ruptured and he collapsed, physically present, no longer a ghost. He blinked, breathless. The air stank of smoke and gunpowder. Church bells clanged in panic. Horses screamed. He was standing in the alleyway between the treasury and a bakery, now converted into a makeshift infirmary. A boy ran past him, carrying cartridges. No one seemed to see him, at least not yet. Then a voice. "You're not supposed to be here," said a man in a black cloak, half his face obscured by a leather mask marked with symbols not of this earth. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who already knew the answer to his own question. Valtor stood, towering over the human. "Who are you?" "The Sons of Mercury," the man said, and motioned to a sigil stitched to his coat. A twin-headed serpent entwined around a falling star. "And we've been expecting you, visitor." That word, visitor, not spy, not intruder, visitor. The man stepped forward. "Your presence here confirms it. They said the Watcher would break the rules." "They?" Valtor asked. The man tapped his forehead, then gestured skyward. "Our benefactors." Valtor's skin shifted color, an involuntary reaction of Virene alarm. The Zal-Keth. It had to be. The only known species with the ability and motive to manipulate emerging civilizations, and whose last interaction with the Virene had led to the decimation of 3 planetary cultures. "You altered this war," Valtor said, scanning with a low-level energy pulse. Sure enough, the mask the man wore was embedded with advanced nanofabric, not of 19th century make. "You're corrupting the human timeline." "No." the man said with a slight smile. "We're accelerating it." As the cloaked figure vanished into the gathering chaos, Valtor's instinct screamed to return, to abandon this collapsing experiment and report the breach. But the chronolens was gone, severed. There would be no return until he found the beacon again. The sound of cannon fire rolled over the buildings, and a plume of fire erupted in the distance. The White House. Valtor turned and caught a glimpse of a woman dragging a wounded soldier away from the encroaching flames. Her face, smudged with soot, held none of the fear he expected. Only defiance. He moved closer. Her name, he would later learn, was Eleanor DeWitt. A physicist in another life, now a tinkerer and ideologue who'd reverse-engineered part of a Zal-Keth artifact when it crash-landed in the hills of Virginia. She had seen through the veil, pieced together truths no one else dared voice. And she too sought to end the influence of those who meddled with history. That night, as the city burned and the British marched, Valtor realized the central conflict wasn't between nations or ideologies. It was a war for control of time itself. He had come to observe history, but history had ensnared him. And now, the outcome depended on a single truth he had yet to uncover. Who, in this altered war, would write the final page? Valtor followed Eleanor through the chaos as if drawn by a magnetic pulse. A pull neither biological nor mechanical, but somehow both. She darted through firelit streets, the ground shuddering beneath the thunder of British cannons and the wailing chorus of a city unraveling. Despite her ragged appearance, torn sleeves, a soot-streaked brow, bloodied knuckles, she moved with fierce purpose. Valtor, though cloaked in a spectral veil to blend among the humans, struggled to match her pace. At last, she pushed open the warped doors of a basement tucked behind a crumbling print shop. Valtor slipped in behind her, disengaging his veil with a shimmering hum. She turned and leveled a pistol at his head. "I knew you weren't just another scavenger," she hissed, eyes narrowing. Valtor did not flinch. "Your weapon will not harm me." "It won't need to," she said, setting it down slowly. "If you were here to kill me, you'd have done it already." She crossed the room, flipping back a canvas to reveal a strange, angular device, half buried in old crates and pages of hand-drawn equations. It pulsed with a low aquamarine glow. The energy signature made Valtor's inner sensors ripple with alarm. "That's Zal-Keth technology," he said, stepping forward, eyes locked on the core. "Where did you get it?" 2 years ago, a star fell over the Shenandoah Valley," she said. "People thought it was divine punishment. I thought it might be something else. I hiked for 2 days through snow and found the wreckage. Whatever it was had been there longer than the war." Valtor's eyes widened. "Then the interference predates 1812. Eleanor nodded. "And it wasn't passive. A few of us reverse-engineered what we could. The Sons of Mercury learned how to communicate through it. They said they were talking to the architects of progress. But they weren't building anything. They were rewriting everything, quietly, carefully. You allied with them?" "For a time. Until I learned they had a plan not just for America, but for humanity's soul." She paused, her voice cracking. "They weren't here to uplift us. They wanted to fracture us, shape our future to serve their war." Valtor moved closer to the device, scanning it. Fractal data streams pulsed across its surface, encoding events that hadn't happened yet. "They're embedding predictive timelines, self-fulfilling chains of events designed to manipulate technological evolution and socio-political formation." "Precisely," she said. "But it's more than that. They want to control who humanity becomes before we even know who we are." Valtor's breath caught. "The Virene prohibit this kind of interference. It is sacrilege." Eleanor looked at him, brow furrowed. "Then why are you here?" He hesitated. "I came to observe, but now I believe I am here to intervene." Footsteps above, Heavy, calculated, not the disorderly trampling of fleeing civilians, but the methodical approach of armed precision. Valtor raised a hand, signaling silence. Eleanor dimmed the core and killed the lantern. The trap door burst open. Figures poured into the room, 3 of them, clad in the black uniforms of the Sons of Mercury. Their eyes glowed faintly, artificial lenses embedded in their sockets. Augmented. One of them pointed at Eleanor. "She's breached the Codex. She must be neutralized." Valtor stepped forward, decloaking fully. "Stand down. You are violating interstellar law." The lead figure tilted his head. "So, the Watcher has become the Warden." "Your presence here is unauthorized," Valtor said. "Your influence has twisted this era. You will cease operations immediately." Instead of retreating, the leader raised a baton etched with alien runes. "We do not recognize your authority. History is a canvas, and we are its artists." Eleanor grabbed the side of the Zalketh core and twisted a dial. The device flared to life, casting sharp blue light across the walls. The agents hissed and staggered back, disoriented. Valtor seized the moment, firing a burst of temporal displacement energy. 2 agents collapsed in a silent burst of particles. The leader lunged at Eleanor, knocking the core from her hands. It skittered across the floor, pulsing erratically. Valtor tackled the attacker, his limbs bending at unnatural angles, a fluid motion that ended with the man pinned against the wall. "Where is the nexus point?" Valtor demanded. "Where is the source of your incursion?" "You're too late," the agent spat. "The rewriting is already underway. From New Orleans to Vienna, from ships at sea to tribal fires in the West. The war you think you understand is already over." Valtor struck a nerve cluster and the man slumped. He turned to Eleanor, who was already gathering pieces of the device. "They're going to accelerate it," she said. "They'll force a confrontation before the Treaty of Ghent, manipulate it to trigger a more devastating conflict." "We must sever the timeline link," Valtor said. "There is a focal relay. If we find it, we can collapse the influence network and isolate the interference." She nodded. "There's one place it could be. Fort McHenry. That's where the transmissions are strongest. It's where they believe the rebirth of the nation can be hijacked." Valtor retrieved the fractured remains of the chronolens from his belt. It shimmered faintly, still broken, but alive. "We'll need to get there before the bombardment." "And if we can't?" Eleanor asked. He paused. "Then this version of history becomes the only one that exists." Eleanor holstered her pistol and lifted the core. "Then let's go rewrite it first." Valtor emerged from the scorched tree line as smoke coiled into the twilight sky above Fort McHenry. The rhythmic thud of mortars reverberated across the harbor, and the stars and stripes, ragged but defiant, flapped amid the carnage. Eleanor crouched beside him, gripping the fractured Zalketh core like a lifeline, its glow muted under layers of ash and desperation. They had mere minutes. The Sons of Mercury had embedded their nexus relay deep within the fort's signal station, masked by the chaos of the British bombardment. It wasn't coincidence. The rewriting of history was always disguised as patriotism or tragedy. The war's turning point, they realized, wasn't the defense of Baltimore. It was the transmission sent from that tower, an encoded burst that would embed artificial causality into every future act of governance and war. Eleanor pressed a crystal shard into Valtor's palm. "I tuned it to resonate with the original sequence," she said. "Insert it at the core, and it should collapse the temporal feed." He nodded, face tight with urgency. "What about you?" "I'll hold them off. If they detect what we're doing, they'll send reinforcements. You need a window." "You won't survive." She smiled faintly. "Neither will this version of me if we fail. Make it count." He hesitated, a rare fracture in his otherwise calculated calm. Then, silently, he slipped through the rubble and shadows, leaving Eleanor to her stand. Inside the fort, smoke clung to stone corridors, and blood stained the flags lining the walls. Valtor moved with precision, stepping over fallen soldiers and flickering light sources. He could hear the whir of alien mechanisms beneath the structure, humming like a buried heart. He reached the signal tower stairs as two agents passed above, speaking in static-toned dialects, Zal-Keth but corrupted. Valtor activated his spectral field and slipped past them undetected, climbing into the relay chamber. At its center pulsed a crystalline obelisk, black, jagged veins of light pulsing like a heartbeat. Cables, both earthly and alien, tethered it to a primitive transmitter modified with unthinkable technology. A British flag lay torn beside it, soaked in seawater and blood, as if even the symbols of empires resisted what this machine represented. He stepped forward, clutching the shard Eleanor had given him. As he neared the relay, its core shimmered, sensing intrusion. It spoke, not in words, but in sensations, hunger, conquest, inevitability. A voice without sound that promised dominion. You cannot undo design, it pulsed. You are bound by observation. I am no longer an observer, Valtor said aloud. He drove the shard into the relay. Light fractured through the room, bending space like ripples in a pond. For a moment, the world stuttered, then screamed. Screams of every war twisted by the nexus, every decision nudged by unseen hands. Time warped around him, fragmenting into versions of Earth that had never come to be. Cities in ruins, skyships over jungles, chrome-armored empires replacing republics before they were born. Then, stillness. The relay shattered, and the transmission ceased. Outside, the mortar fire began to falter. British ships reeled back into the fog, confused. Within moments, a silence more profound than any peace overtook the battlefield. Valtor stumbled from the tower, eyes glazed with afterimages of 1,000 false timelines. He expected to find Eleanor waiting, but she wasn't. The ground where she had made her last stand bore only a smoldering scorch mark and fragments of the core. Her sacrifice had bought him the time. He stood alone, absorbing the quiet. But then, behind him, a flicker, an echo not of time, but of resistance. He turned slowly. A boy stood at the edge of the rubble, no older than 10, eyes wide, holding a battered book titled Chronicles of Liberty. The same glyph Eleanor had etched on her tools was drawn in charcoal on the cover. "Where did you get that?" Valtor asked, kneeling. The boy shrugged. "It was always in my family. My great-grandmother wrote some of it." Valtor's breath caught. "Eleanor," he whispered. The boy smiled, then ran back into the city, vanishing among the survivors and refugees. Valtor looked to the sky. The stars were still aligned. The War of 1812 had ended, but the war for truth, for freedom unmanipulated by foreign hands or alien minds, had only just begun. The real victory wasn't the defense of a fort or the recitation of an anthem. It was the reclaiming of history. And this time, it would be written by those who lived it.